Good morning, everyone. I am Mike Ferrante. I'm the student lead for the Franchises in Transition panel. Unfortunately, Brian Burke is not able to make it today, but we have a fantastic panel with a fantastic lineup of panelists. First, we have Rita Benson-LeBlanc from the New Orleans Saints, Drew Carey from the Seattle Sounders, Daryl Morey from the Houston Rockets, Parag Marathe from the San Francisco 49ers, and George Pistolas from the Houston Astros. And our moderator is Tony Reale from ESPN. So the panel will run until 11:20, and then we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. If you want to ask a question, you can text ASK1 to 37048, or you can tweet with the hashtag SSAC. With that, I'll leave it over to Tony.
We can clap, it's all right. Got some very distinguished guests here. Thank you, Michael. Thrilled to be here. From the first day at PTI, when I gave some advice to a co-host of the show who said, well, maybe for MVP, I'll just pick RBI total and just say that's going to be the MVP of the year. I said, I don't think you should do that, and that was Kornheiser. So I feel like, I've been pointing in this direction, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot from the people here this weekend, and maybe I can go from being stat boy to stat man or stat tween. And there's just also one other thing that I have here. Anyone know what this is? This is the mute button. So in case anybody gets a little long-winded, we can always do that. I got repetitive stress syndrome from smacking that on around the horn every day.
Anyone can hit it?
Anybody can hit it. If you feel like somebody's going long, we'll put this over here. Okay. And Reed, I can give this to you because I think Drew is going to be no. So this is Franchises in Transition. We're going to start really big picture, okay? Recognition that you are a franchise in transition. And, there are three ways, I think, to get players on a team, right? There's the draft, there's free agency, and there's trades. And Daryl, you're going through a trade deadline right now. March 15th is the NBA's trade deadline. So can you maybe start us off and talk about what it's like, what are the pros and cons of each strategy, and how do you value, even from the analytical side, how do you value which strategy to take?
Well, usually this conference is after the trade deadline, which is better timing for me. I would say, in general, we're trying to, our transition is we had Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady, two top 10 players in the league when they were healthy. And now we're trying to get back to being a championship contender, and we're a little bit short, but each year we've progressed since then. In terms of your specific question, I try not to lock ourselves into any strategy. I think you need to use all the tools, but historically and the way we've done the best is really through the draft and trade. Free agency, you have winner's curse, where if you're the top bidder, there's often a reason. You've beaten out as the high bidder of multiple other teams, and it usually isn't a great strategy. That said, we've used it with some success, but trade and draft are really the tools that we're primarily using to upgrade the team.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, this is Franchises in Transition, but it could be franchises in elevation for Parag and for Rita and even for Drew here. These are teams with a winning history. And I want to ask you, Parag, specifically, in the last year, the San Francisco 49ers went from being a team that was one of the disappointments, if I can say that, in 2010, to a team in 2011 that brought in a new coach, which is usually a sign of rebuilding, and winning a division title, winning a playoff game at home, all your first year as COO, so, congratulations on that. What made the team say, we're going to win now instead of rebuild?
So I think we looked at a lot of things. Similar to what Daryl said about free agency versus the draft. We like to build our team through the draft as well. I mentioned this in the last panel. The draft is where you get players at wholesale, and free agency is retail. And in the NFL, when you have a hard salary cap, the more players you can get at wholesale, the better off you're going to be. And so looking at how we were in 2010, we were 6-10, but we lost 7 games by 3 or fewer points, or in the last 2 minutes, or in the last minute of the game. So we really thought we were a team that had the talent to be very competitive, if not win our division. And keep in mind, the division winner in our division in 2010 was 7-9. Mm-hmm. So we really thought we were a team that could easily bringing in the right leadership could win the division. And so that's why when we went out and was searching for a coach, we really wanted to look for a person who made an immediate turnaround in his respective stops. And then Coach Harbaugh, he did it at University of San Diego, he did it at Stanford, two places that he instantly turned around just by strong leadership. And we really felt that we had a talented team, that we weren't ready to dismantle the team. We were a young team. We were a team under contract for a long time. A lot of players under contract. So we really felt like once we brought in the right leadership, we had an opportunity to be successful immediately and consistently.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to open it up to everybody in a second. But Parag, if you could just address, Jim Harbaugh, there is kind of a feeling in the NFL that coaches straight out of college can't always get to a level in the NFL. And we've seen Jimmy Johnson, yes, do it, but there are many coaches on the other side of that story that haven't had the same success in the NFL. So, you could speak specifically to Harbaugh here. What about Harbaugh made you think that was going to be the case? But also, were you a little nervous about that?
Yeah, historically, the jump of a college head coach to an NFL head coach without any NFL coordinator experience, I think the combined winning percentage of all those coaches in the last 30 years is around 400, or maybe even under that. So it's not good. So that obviously was one factor. But then one thing that gave us more comfort, or at least mitigated the risk in our mind, was the fact that Coach Harbaugh played 14 years in the NFL at probably the most cerebral position in sports. Mm-hmm. And he played it successfully. So he was a quarterback. He was every week part of the offensive game planning at his respective clubs. He understood how the NFL worked, and most importantly, understood how NFL players ticked. And I think that really made us feel good about his prospects as an NFL head coach. That plus the fact that he got a lot of advice and continues to get a lot of advice from his very successful brother in the AFC.
Mr. George Postelos, this is going to be your first spring training. This is your first spring training. It's going to be your first opening day. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
The team, the Houston Astros, are, I guess, a team and franchise in transition and rebuilding and also maybe rebranding the team. Can you talk about some of the decisions you've had to make in the last couple of months and some of the things that you value and some of the analytics that came into making those decisions?
Well, one thing I want to say is I don't want to have to lose 106 games again to get on this panel. But that definitely qualifies you for being a franchise in transition. I think that as Jim Crane spent with me, say, the last 4 or 5 years looking at franchises in Major League Baseball. He had that objective of owning a Major League Baseball franchise. And he told me at the beginning, we'll look at every franchise, we'll bid on everything that's available. If we don't get it, we'll take a lesson from that, and then we'll apply it once we end up acquiring a team. And we're fortunate enough to get the hometown team. You can never count on that, but it turned out that way, which is terrific. And the lesson that we learned really was that the franchises that have had the most success in baseball are the ones that have gotten to the stage where they have the best young talent and then made their run. I think much like Parag and Darryl have said, in Major League Baseball, acquiring talent in the draft is key, or in trades is key, because if you're in free agency, you're by definition the highest bidder, so that's going to be your least efficient place to buy talent. But in baseball, it really seems to tilt more heavily in that direction. And so that's really our focus, and everything we're doing right now is to become that franchise that has the best young talent in baseball.
Mm-hmm. I want to just maybe touch upon how fans play into the rebranding here, and you can address it first, and Drew and Rita, of course, as well. Is there something that you look at from an analytic perspective, or also something that, do you feel pressure from fans? And where does that rank on the pressures you feel as far as your next decision?
I think that you have to go into it with a plan, and we went into it with a plan, and we have 2 planks to it, and one is focused on becoming the franchise that has the best young talent, so we're going to stick with that. But the other part is we want to be the ownership and senior management team that's the most interactive with our customers and prospects, and because we think that drives sales, but it also, that's really what drives your brand, because in the first instance, the people that follow you the most closely in your local market, do they know you? Do they know what you're trying to accomplish? And you got to stay in front of those people. And I think we've done 15 events with Jeff Luno, our new general manager, Jim Crane, and I with season ticket holders, say over the last 45 days, groups as large as 150 accounts, groups as small as 10 accounts, and we have them at the stadium. It's either a breakfast, a lunch, or a dinner, and we shake their hands and do small talk in advance. Then we talk for a little bit about the direction of the team. Then we take questions and try to communicate to them, the plan, and then also get feedback from them and turn around with some new initiatives.
That was going to be my next question. I mean, because you had the Fan Fest, and that was a very big success this year. And that was kind of your introduction, and Jim Crane's introduction to the fan base, and vice versa, I guess. Did you walk away with something saying, you know what, that is the right idea. That's the direction we need to go in?
Yes, they were very angry. They're very angry, lost 106 games. We had an extended ownership transition. These franchises are very hard. They're very hard to sell, and they're very hard to buy. And fans get frustrated with that, and there's a lot of frustration that's built up. And Jim came away from that saying we need to make an investment in our season ticket accounts. And so what we ended up doing was giving them a couple $1 million in credit to spend at the stadium. We passed it out around all the season ticket holders. That went over big. $5 beer at every concession stand was something that came up. We did that. And then people in baseball, and this is not true in basketball at least, they're used to going to a game with a bottle of water and a sandwich. And you couldn't do that in Houston because of the concession contract. So we went back and changed the concession contract. We probably got more goodwill out of that than anything with the general public.
One of the great fan experiences, maybe in all of sports, is in Seattle with Drew. And you can just feel it while watching it on TV. So I want you, maybe if you could tell your story a little bit, taking the team, and didn't you spend a year as a photographer just photographing games?
Yeah, I was retired for a while, and I started following, that's when I got interested in soccer. I started going to Galaxy games and U.S. men's team games, and they let me go to the sidelines, and I brought my camera, and I got to know the photographers, and I eventually ended up shooting the World Cup in Germany as a professional photographer for a guy that ran a photo service, and they get treated like shit, by the way, professional photographers. But it was a really great experience, and I ended up doing a special for the Travel Channel, and I was in Barcelona, and I was talking to one of the guides at the museum there at the stadium, which gets like 30,000 visitors a day. It's the most visited museum in all of Spain, the Barcelona soccer, where they have all their old tickets and cleats and all that stuff. And he was talking about the election. I said, what are you talking about? And every 4 years, they have an election in Barcelona for the president of the club. This club's worth like $1.5 billion or something like that. It's one of the most valuable clubs in the world. And same thing with Real Madrid. If one of us wanted to be president of Real Madrid, we'd put up a 15% bond in the team, whatever the team's worth, so we have to scrape together $80 million. And then we mount a campaign, just like you're running for governor or president, and you say, I should be president of Real Madrid because I'm going to bring this player, I'm going to change the culture. And if the members of the, people pay a fee to be a member of Real Madrid, and the season ticket holders and stuff, and if they buy your line, they'll vote you in, and you run in this $1 billion team. They have an election every 4 years. It's crazy. And I wanted to bring that to the United States, and I convinced Joe Roth, who's the majority owner of the Sounders, to implement the system. So this is our 4th year in existence. We get 38,000 a game last season. We're going to get probably 40,000 a game this season for an MLS team. It's phenomenal. And we let the fans vote out the general manager every 4 years if they don't like the job he's doing. So our fans, if they don't like the job...
Jeff Van Gundy's in favor of this idea.
It's great, like this site. And, the idea that you're talking to the fans and letting them influence your decisions, that's the biggest thing we do in Seattle, and that's brought us all kinds of goodwill. We let our fans serve on a council. If you get 25 other members, if you're a season ticket holder, you're a member and you get to vote. And if you get 25 other members to elect you, you can serve on a council. You meet with the actual owners, like me, Joe, Roth, Adrian Hanauer, a representative from Vulcan Sports, Siggy Schmidt, our head coach comes, and we talk to these council members, and there's like 30 of them right now, and they're like our canary in the coal mine for anything that's going on with the fans. And you know, we have the regular meetings like you do with our season ticket holders and our big groups. And we're, you know, our members voted on the name of the team, for crying out loud. Like, we let them pick the name of the team, and every decision we make, in the back of our mind is, oh, these guys can get rid of Adrian if they don't like what we're doing, and then we're going to have to hire a new guy. And that's going to be the whole future of the team for the next, hopefully around 100 years. And that drives everything in our club, and it's turned out to be really great.
Can you see other teams do it? You said that, and I felt a shift in all the chairs over here. Everybody was like, can you see other teams doing that? And you all can address that.
Well, the way I convinced Joe was I said that, you know, I said everybody that reads the paper knows when the general manager has to go. I mean, it was no secret that Matt Millen was a bad general manager in Detroit, you know. They just wouldn't fire him, and you wonder, like, well, does he have pictures or, like, you know, somebody coming out of a hotel room? Or maybe he brings his family by at Christmas, and I don't want to fire that poor guy. I know his kids. Like, who knows why they're keeping a guy? But the fans don't care, and they'll just fire him, and you can say, hey, sorry, the fans voted, nothing I can do. And, like, you know, we elect a mayor, you elect judges you never heard of. You know, when you vote, you don't know what judge you're voting for. You go by honestly, who researches that? And, you know.
Bill skirt line.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You vote on a president why not be able to vote on who's going to run your sports team? And and we hire them. They don't get to hire anybody. They should get rid of them if they think they're doing a bad job, if they're not satisfying their needs. Yeah, I mean, it seems like really reasonable to me that the fans should have
This fascinates me. I mean,
and it's only season ticket holders, too.
This is great because we have a shared history here in that we both have worked on game shows with a very mysterious scoring system. and I vote somebody off every segment. So
yeah, but this is like, I mean, I wouldn't trust like 10 random fans, you know what I mean, to get rid of somebody, because honestly, what do they know? Just like I wouldn't trust 10 random voters or anything to get rid of the mayor. But, you know, the whole city deciding this mayor could come in and I'm satisfied with the way the city is run, even though there's not that great maybe, and, you know, this is the lesser of two evils, whatever choices you make when you elect somebody. Same thing with our general manager. Like, we could have a losing season, and he could go to the message boards and say, hey, you know, we lost because this guy was hurt. It's not my fault. You know, it's the fourth year. You can elect me. And if we even have a system where if we have in our system, if like they vote out a guy, you know, if we have Joe Blow and they vote him out, and then we hire Jeff Blow, his brother, who thinks the same way he does, the fans can sign a petition. If they get 20% of the fans to sign a petition, they can have a vote that year. So realistically, or, you know, technically every year they can get rid of the general manager if they want. And it's always this pressure to win and to serve the fans. Not just to win, but to serve the fans at the same time. And our season ticket holders, who are your best customer. And then the MLS, we don't have TV revenue. It's non-existent. Like, we're not even rarely on TV. And when we are, we don't get there's no ratings, there's no TV money. Everything we make is in the stadium. Our ad revenue in the stadium, our concession revenue. So we have to really go overboard serving our fans that show up. And I don't see, we bend over backwards. And I think anybody could do this and be really successful. If I owned a Costco, I would do it.
I would say as a GM, when we talked about this, I do think general managers should get replaced more. I agree with that. I'm just giving a counter, but I'm intrigued by the idea, actually. I do think in quite a few sports, and George is going through this now, the general manager, to get your probability of winning a title higher, often will have to do very short-term, unpopular things, and that might be the biggest challenge there. Now, but to back up your point, they could sell their plan, right? Yeah. If they can't sell their plan, you might not want them anyway. So and the other challenge is if you get a large base, I mean, you know, you're in California. Direct democracy and ballot initiatives have some challenge to it, in terms of it being totally always the right decision. So, but in terms of getting fans involved, how can you do better than that? I mean, I think it's intriguing.
Yeah, well, here's my big selling point of why people should do this. If you have a fan that's a season ticket holder, especially, who are your biggest fan, who spend the most money on concessions and hats and, you know, all the merch where you make a lot of your extra money, if they're unsatisfied, what's their choice? If they can write a letter to the editor and go on a message board, and their ultimate choice to show dissatisfaction is to not buy a ticket. And that's when you lost them. And then it takes so much to get them back and so much money to get that customer back. Why let that ever happen? If you give them a vote and a say-so, they can say, well, things aren't going well, but I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to keep buying my ticket, and you kind of marry them to the team. So, you know, marriages go through rocky periods, but there's no divorce. And when they stop buying a ticket, they're divorced. So you want to just, if it's a rocky period, it's a rocky period, and you're having an argument, but at least they're still buying the ticket, at least they're still buying hats and T-shirts, and you want to keep them as a customer. And by giving, and I really do trust all the fans to make as good a decision as one person, you know, when it comes to should this guy go or not. And everybody knows.
It's like Wikipedia.
Yeah. So, you know, if you can vote for a president and a mayor, you can vote out a general manager if he's doing
Okay,
that.
so by the silence I'm hearing from you guys, I guess you just agree with this, and we're just going to go and we're going to hang with it.
Well, the other counterpoint would be if you have to do, even on selling the plan to get voted in, which you might have to do multiple step strategic moves.
Yeah, ours is you just don't want to get voted out. You know what I mean? Like, you can, as long as we don't let anybody hire anybody. Like, you can't run. That's Real Madrid.
Oh, you don't. Oh, you can just get rid of them.
Yeah, we
and
can
then
just get
you
rid of
vote,
them, yeah.
and then you bring the new guy in.
Yeah, then we can hire.
Oh,
We can hire
interesting.
anybody we want. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't.
one of the issues though is you got to compete for talent, and so you know if somebody's a really good general manager candidate, he's going to have more than he or she is going to have more than one option, and so if coming to San Francisco meant that they had a chance to be voted out in 1, 2, or 4 years, it might make it a less desirable spot for them.
Yeah,
to
but
go to.
I'll never hire a salesman that won't work on commission. You know what I mean? If you're whatever, you're all MBA students, a lot of people here. You're going to be in a business. You're going to hire a sales force, and if you have somebody that's not willing to work on commission, don't hire them. You're going to have an order taker, and you don't want a bunch of order takers working for you because they won't work as hard. You know, and if I want to hire somebody that knows they're under the gun, they know they have to do a good job every single day when they show up, or they're going to be out of a job. You know, I'm in the TV business, and I put up with it. You know, if I don't do a good job on Price is Right, if I don't do a good stand-up, they're not having me back, and I'm going to get fired. I live with it, and it makes me perform every single day, and why shouldn't anybody that works for me not have that same pressure, especially with so much at stake? And I think when you're a franchise in transition or starting out, like, it's a good thing you're doing because you have to set the culture is more important than a draft pick. Setting the culture of the organization is the most important thing you can do. You want a winning culture. You want to set high standards. You know what I mean? And so having that kind of pressure on your general manager helps that out, you know, to set those high standards. Because if you don't have that, you don't have anything.
I just want to say it's a very hard job. I would say it's
Very
the
difficult,
I would
yeah.
say it's the hardest job. And I think that you have to think about how to set the general manager up for success. I think that's one of the most important things that you do as a president or CEO or as an owner. I mean, that's been our experience. And I think in terms of the way we set up our investment case, in terms of the way we try to introduce ourselves to the market, and the way we're handling our conversation with the fans, everything's really with an eye to setting things up in a way where if Jeff has a chance to be successful. Because I think very few, it's just an incredibly difficult job, and you've got to put them in a situation where they have an opportunity to be successful, to sell their plan. They can't do it by themselves. There has to be good alignment between ownership, management, and the general manager and the coaching staff and the players to the extent that you can get it, and then you bring the fans in. Without that, they really have no chance to be successful.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Let's
Rita,
hear
you've
from
been
Rita.
so patient over there.
Yeah.
No, I love everything he's saying. So,
Hold up that left hand for us, and let's see the bling. This is franchises in transition. We got a champion here.
so
Rita with the New Orleans Saints. And of course, you're just talking about changing the culture, and Drew was saying how that, for him, comes from the fans. But just as an outsider here, Rita, I feel like the culture with the Saints, of course, was affected so much by Hurricane Katrina and what happened in New Orleans. But for me, it was bringing in Drew Brees. I think that's one of the best free agency moves in maybe the history of the NFL. So can you talk a little bit about how you work with the community, how the community was when you brought Drew Brees in, the decisions you made, you know, to respect the community, and how Drew Brees factored into that?
absolutely. First of all, I agree completely as far as the culture comes first. The intimate relationship that you have with your fans and your community can transcend everything. So I don't believe in promising wins and losses because you're setting up your fans' expectations to be something that you can't reach. But if they have faith in the direction of that general manager, they're going to support that person. And what you're saying is that you take that emotionality away from firing someone, because I've watched a lot of coaches actually who couldn't do that. Mike Ditka could not fire his friends that he had hired. He could not deal with our offensive coordinator. There are things like that. So if you have a system where you listen to the fans, it actually brings it a little bit more to analytics, because they're looking at the stats, they're looking at the results, and they're saying this is the logical thing to do, and it helps you in making that decision. Post-Katrina, our community was distraught, disheveled. It's hard. It was so intimate. We all went through it. And at the time, Drew could not lift his arm above his shoulder. So it looks great now, and we've won the Super Bowl, and we've had an exciting run all together. But we had a first-year coach who wanted to get this quarterback. The kind of things, the details that we went through, we did research on him. The day he came for his tryout, random friend of mine knew a player that he'd worked with in high school. We had him try out on the same day. Everything was casual. All of our people were there on a Saturday, and it felt like family. Our PowerPoint was welcoming him and his wife. I mean, clearly family, and that is important to Drew. And when we had our press conference and that we had signed him, he said, "I just felt like the Saints had as much faith in me as I had in myself." And that was the difference. Clearly in negotiating, we also were paying more than Miami was offering, but at the same time, it's the right fit at the right time. And in those first two conversations with Sean and with Drew, you can't just come and play in New Orleans. There's too much going on. This is too intimate of a city. You have to be committed to the rebuilding of this city in a very, very serious way. And from our family, as far as an ownership, we don't micromanage in that regard as far as constantly talking about, are you reinforcing our culture? But that mantra from the start, from the beginning, transcended with them. And that's what they did. And the other factor is that everyone wants to be liked, and as far as the players want to be successful and glorified and what have you. So the response they were getting from our community of appreciation, the way they were around in the city day to day, I can't train my fans to do that, but that's the intimate relationship that they had, to where everyone was so appreciative that anybody was there. If you were showing up, if you were physically there, you weren't just saying, we're going to be here, we're going to be present. There was so much negativity from the media and the outside. I'd have an interview where in the same interview, the person saying, "Why aren't you back in New Orleans?" Well, logistically, the airport is not open. You can't move fans in and out. And at the same time, well, why are you there and why are you making an effort? So it was very difficult for our fans and for ourselves to just try to work through it. But we did, and we were successful. And there are a lot of little things that we did that the fans just know and understand. It's literally every touch point. It's every communication. It's your press conferences, but it's also the letters you send, so that they're not just form letters. It's involving not just your season ticket holders. In fact, after Katrina, that first season, we sold out on a season ticket basis for the first time in our history. So I had no Nielsen ratings, no way to prove that New Orleans was going to be open and back, but I could say I've got 70,000 season ticket holders. Those people plan to be here for all games. So that was something that from a business financial perspective, our fans put their money up ahead of time, invested in us, and we used that as our story to the nation. So it's not just feel sorry for New Orleans, help us rebuild. There were so many other things that were going on. And it was a very delicate message for me to say through the media to our fans as well, that we're here as long as people are here. And I'm not holding a gun to anybody's head, but I'm trying to send that message that we need people here. We need companies investing in our community, but we also need the businesses and the people that live here to keep living here and to fight for being around. And that message, that story transcended to the nation, and people followed it. So we were talking about certain players that transcend, that they go mainstream, and it's because of the story. It's people in sports who love sports will follow success and winning, but you have a story, and those players knew they were fighting for something far greater than themselves, and it's inspired them. But it was very symbiotic. It was back and forth, and as the city needed inspiration from the team winning, the team also needed that affection that came from our people. And the one other thing that it's one of my VP's idea, but it was a brilliant idea. After that season, we had a first-year coach, first-year quarterback. We had Reggie Bush. We had a lot of crazy, cool things happening. And we went one game away from the Super Bowl. And that next season, I got to surprise 70,000 fans because when we went to drop the banner, they thought it was going to be one of the game banners. And the first banner we dropped in the preseason was for the fans.
And you're getting worked
bleed
up.
it. I bleed it. No, but it was, for what we know, it's the first time in sports that someone dropped a banner for the season ticket holders. And so is that they did that. And we've sold out every season since then. And they know that I cry because I'm such a softie, I guess.
Oh, thanks for sharing. That's very nice.
Well, I got to say, isn't it true that the greatest thing about the sports business is that it's the one where you have such an intimate relation with your customers, more than having a Sears or anything else. That's the fans are everything, and if you don't have a way to have fan outreach, to meet with the fans, to actually talk, touch them, shake their hand, if you're not doing that, then you're losing somehow. You're gonna have a rough time making money, man, in the sports business.
Okay, since we're talking about how fans, embrace either a storyline or a certain athlete, I'm gonna bring in two athletes here, and you guys can bring in anyone you want. But we'll talk about Tim Tebow and we'll talk about Jeremy Lin and the phenomenon. I'm happy you're sitting here, and I really respect you for sitting here. We're going to talk about, just phenomenon, though, and how something, almost inexplicable comes up. I mean, and how do you explain the inexplicable? And how do you get your arms around, okay, let's say Tim Tebow, whose stats, or, you can't really even figure out how he's winning the game, and how can you, rely on something where if all your information, all your analytics, all your stats don't really back it up. Or Jeremy Lin. And Jeremy Lin, to be fair here, the two most, analytically savvy teams maybe in the NBA, the Rockets, Warriors, had
Mavericks.
Jeremy Lin.
Mavericks
in there as well, of course. And he still, wasn't the Jeremy Lin then that we know Jeremy Lin now. So, I mean, how do you explain all that?
Well, I think it's an amazing story. One of the, definitely it just wasn't going to play out in Houston, and it's exciting where it's playing out for the league. And I think it's been fascinating for us because we try to learn from everything. I think if you're an organization trying to get better, you try to learn from everything. And I think it shows the real power of role and opportunity. And Jeremy Lin was going to succeed. He's a hardworking, smart, talented kid who is going to pan out. And we try to bring those players in whenever we can. And frankly, we don't know which ones are going to pan out. We're supposed to, I'd get voted out by Drew's folks. We're supposed to be the ones who are saying we're the expert. Really, all we can do is shift the odds in our favor. So we bring a lot of high talent players in, Aaron Brooks, Goran Dragic, Carl Landry, Chandler Parsons. We bring those guys in constantly, Von Wafer, and sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't pan out, sometimes they pan out other places. So when you bring a lot of good quality players in, some are going to succeed, some of them you're going to waive, some of you are going to waive correctly, some incorrectly. All we can do is try and shift the odds in our favor. And I think it really shows the whole story too, how people focus on action that fails, i.e. if we knew Jeremy was going to be this good and we wouldn't have waived him. We would have maneuvered, traded, waived, we would have done a lot of things that teams don't ever do in our situation when we had multiple good point guards and multiple guaranteed contracts and we needed a center. If we knew he was going to be that good. And the reality is we didn't know, and I argue no one knows no one could know he was this good. There were a lot of people who thought he was high potential. Golden State should get the most credit for Jeremy Lin. They gave him his first big deal. Dallas brought him in. We brought him in. But you got just to talk geek a little bit, you also got to focus on what's called, that's type 1 error, taking action and it fails. Type 2 error is all the opportunities you could have taken but didn't. And every team could have drafted him, could have signed him, and he was missed. And last point, there's a lot of Jeremy Lins. I disagree with Coach Van Gundy yesterday. He said there isn't. There is. There's about 20 to 25 guys in every draft who dominate competition that it's very hard to judge how they're going to work at the next level. Our job is to sift through and find those guys, and the point Adam Silver makes is the league did sift through and found him. He didn't struggle in Europe or anything. There's a lot of guys who did. And there are a lot of those guys, and a lot of them don't get the role and opportunity that they do. And now we're sitting on what's amazing. Tebow, they can address. But I think it's one of the most amazing stories to happen in a long time. And it's really exciting for the league.
It's really all about opportunity. That's what it comes down to. I mean, the talent level at the NBA level, at the NFL level, at the MLB level, at MLS, it's all it's within a very, very narrow band. And it really comes down to one is the psychological piece, you know, the dedication and the confidence and the desire to be successful. And number two, and arguably the biggest one, is opportunity. That's really what it comes down to. And so you never know until you actually thrust someone into that. Not Tim Tebow. I'd like to focus on Victor Cruz, who's a guy who probably wasn't making that team this year had they not had a couple injuries at the beginning of the season. And instead he goes on to, you know, set the Giants record for receiving yards and win a Super Bowl and, you know, catch about everything thrown his way in the championship game against us. And so, and it just comes out, he had the opportunity. I'll talk about one in our case. We were trying to re-sign Takeo Spikes last year at inside linebacker. We wanted him back for a year because the leadership he brought in the locker room and all of that. And we had a guy behind him, a young player named Navarro Bowman that we had drafted last year, who had sat on the bench basically his entire rookie year behind Takeo. Takeo was a free agent. We still tried to bring him back because we wanted him for his leadership. Turns out he went and took a bigger, longer deal somewhere else. And so we said, okay, we'll play Navarro then. We may not have that leadership that Takeo has, but let's see what Navarro can do. And Navarro turned out to be a first-team All-Pro player and considered now to be on the same level as Patrick Willis almost. So, and that didn't come because we knew he had the skill set, but we still weren't giving him that opportunity. We were still trying to put Takeo Spikes there, even though we knew he had the talent. Sometimes opportunities are fortuitous, and you know, how it comes about is how it comes about. But that's really at this level, it comes down to that more than it does the skill level.
But there's two different things here. It's great athletes and competitive, and you know them in that world. We had Darren Sproles, who suddenly he's like Speedy Gonzalez. He's like the most amazing returner and receiver, and he's just amazing talent. But not everybody knows his name. Tim Tebow and that kind of phenomenon, or when we had Reggie Bush, it's unbelievable as far as mass mob mentality that they pierce not only just the nation as far as public knowledge, but then actually get embedded into vernacular. I mean, and people keep talking about that. And I think that that's remarkable for sports in general, but especially for the NFL. So I've had people ask, well, it's hype or it's this or it's that, and it's inexplicable. But what I care about is the conversation, the value in that you are bringing people that wouldn't necessarily pay as close attention as we do because it's our industry and it's what we're passionate about. But suddenly it ties the world to it. I mean, they're opening doors to people that would never really follow sports. And that phenomenon, as it keeps going, is you can't manifest it. You don't know what it is. It's just their star is shining, and thank goodness it's in our industry, and it's exciting. And the mix of all these personalities, I think, is what makes the league strong and the teams and the sports strong and exciting. And also in the media session, it's like, it's current, it's live, it's amazing, and it's these fascinating people, and it's in real time. And that's why sports channels that energy for the fans. No matter what your life is like, you are pulled together in this group setting, whether you're watching at home or whether you're in the stadium. If you're conveying that excitement, you're pulling people together, and they're having their emotional reactions and their excitement tied to your sport, tied to what you do. And it's religious for some people.
Notice that all the players that we're talking about don't get paid unless they perform.
Yep.
You know,
Fantastic.
Like they're really great, but as soon as they don't have a good season, fans don't care about them. Jeremy Lin is great this season, but he can end up like Mark the Bird Fidrich, you know, who was also great, and then he wasn't. And then now he's a farmer.
I think fans remember people.
Yeah, they'll remember you, but he's not making millions of dollars playing baseball like he was. He was a big phenomenon too, Mark the Bird Fidrich. And, just like Jeremy Lin, and everybody was talking about him, but as soon as you don't perform, I don't see why the
Okay, but let's talk
front
about
office would
players who are
be
more
using that.
established then, because, phenomenon has been a trend with Lynn and Tebow in the last 6 months. But there's also been, and this is,
And Victor Cruz. I
and
agree
Victor
with-
Cruz, yes,
yeah.
let's not forget Cruz. The players acting almost as de facto GMs. We've seen this with Dwight Howard. We've seen this with Carmelo Anthony last year. I mean, LeBron's decision, of course, he held the franchise in the palm of his hands. And even you can bring in Peyton Manning this season. He's not acting as a de facto GM, but that's a player, whose future, one moment he was the entire franchise, the next moment he's not. So those guys, are established, and there's going to be maybe some, backlash if they were to go somewhere. What are the challenges to handling that? Maybe George, you can start. You've had Yao Ming in the past, with
Yes,
the
I
Houston
think
Rockets.
you don't chase the story. I think this applies to the guys that you described as phenomenon, and it applies to the guys that you're describing as established players. But don't chase the story. You have to have a plan, and you have to stick to the plan, and then take advantage of the opportunities. If you have a player like Jeremy Lin, that's found gold, and you want to take great advantage of it. Same thing with Yao Ming. Yao Ming, the Rockets drafted Yao Ming because he was the best player available in the draft. Everybody else would have drafted him too. And then once you have him, you want to figure out a way to take advantage of him. But that by itself, at the end of the day, what fans really care about is whether you're winning and whether you're headed in the right direction. And it's also about the relationship that you build with them, for sure. But they're not going to, that story could be, how many games has Jeremy Lin played? He's played a dozen games. It's not going to carry, we just don't know how far it's going to go. So you got to have a plan about where to get to. Don't chase the story. Take advantage of it when you can.
I think Jeremy Lin he's not going to be Mark Fidrich. I think he's a quality player. He's going to continue to be a very high quality player. I would say in the sport, you talk about top players acting as GMs. Power flows to who makes the biggest win impact. In our sport, that's unquestionably the top 10 to 20 players in the league. Our top players make more of a win impact than any other major sport in the world by a huge margin. LeBron James, 60-win team on Cleveland. He leaves, team's basically the same. They win in the 20s. That win impact is just dwarfed. So power flows to those folks. They're way more important than the coach, the GM. In football, I think it's quarterback, coach are probably the two biggest win impact, so power is going to flow there. And whoever has that win impact power is going to have more decision-making power. And so I think it's just a natural outgrowth of that, why the players, rationally are dictating things.
We're about 2 minutes away from getting to a point where we can take your questions, so feel free to text them and send them in, and Michael will bring them up in a second. Talking about franchises in transition, and the goal, of course, is to be a winner. And I had a question here about just competitive balance of the leagues. Daryl, you have any idea how many franchises have won an NBA title in the last 30 years?
I think it's 7 or 8.
Yeah, I think it's 9 and 32. And in Major League Baseball,
The odds are not good, by the way. Yeah.
Because you have so many teams repeating, the Bulls and the Rockets in the 90s, and of course the Celtics and Lakers. And Major League Baseball, it's 11 in the last 20. Football, it's 7 different franchises winning a Super Bowl in the last 11. Hockey's had 8 different teams win their last 8 cups. So, on the surface, I guess, it seems like hockey has the most competitive balance. But I want to get your take on this. And you could speak to this, Parag, first. From the NFLs, how do you feel the league that's one of the strengths of the league, is the competitive balance?
Yeah, the league's set up to promote and create competitive balance, especially now with the new CBA. Daryl talked about the winner's curse. In the old CBA with the first-round picks, you had to pay so much that the penalty of missing set you back for another couple years. So now with the way it's structured, with a hard salary cap, with a very clear defined salary structure for rookies, it really is set up for teams to make an immediate impact, an immediate turnaround. We went from 6-10 to 13-3 in 1 year, in a shortened offseason, with a lockout, with a brand new coach, a brand new coaching staff, and a brand new system. So it really is set up to promote that. At the same time, it is a quarterback-driven league. And so if you've got a quarterback at the top of his game, you know, one of the top 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks, that defines the team for a long period of time. You can get by with you know, less than superior talent at other positions if you have a superior quarterback because he's just going to make the other players better. So yes, there's competitive balance, but the teams with the elite quarterbacks can kind of carry that forward for a little bit longer through the down years.
Kind of say, I think a lot of the reason, that's all, I think a lot of the reason that there's a few teams that win all the time and a lot of teams that never compete is that, frankly, a lot of owners don't care if they win or not. You know, they're just in it to make money. You can be in the business to win and make money, or you can be in the just charge money for a ticket business and charge money for parking business and hope you make a profit every year and hope your TV revenue is good and you're happy with that. And there's not a lot of them, but thankfully for us, there's enough owners out there where we know these guys are not going to compete with us every single year, and we're going to be in the mix because some guys just don't care.
Well, that's kind of stinky for the fans.
Yeah, it is, and you know, but I don't have to name it. You can look at the paper and you know who doesn't care about winning because they never win any games, and they trade away guys that are good just to make money and just so they don't lose cash, and you know, they're always a perennial loser, and every year they lie to the fans and they say, we're going to go get them this year, and it's all just a PR campaign.
Vote out owners every 4
Yeah,
years?
let's vote out the owners.
Drives me crazy, you know, that's out there. But, you know, I always suspected it, but I never had any proof till I became an owner myself. You know, you meet these guys, and they're like, man, they don't care if they win. I meet them at dinners and stuff, and I go, this guy doesn't care if he wins. He just wants to make a profit. And I'm glad they're there, because that means we can beat them all the time.
I believe competitive advantage is the strength of the NFL, and as far as why we command the highest rights fees for television, the fact that, I mean, the matchups and the statistical data and the things that are worked so intensely behind the scenes to make sure that throughout the season the matchups create the highest revenues, and then our flex scheduling, those kind of things. But it, you know, that wouldn't be as successful if we didn't have the team parity that we do, and the way we share revenue and the way we have our hard cap. It's fair. I wouldn't be as inspired to be a part of something that was really about the have and have-nots. It's what our fans have faith in. It's what all the fans of the NFL have faith in, is that they know their team can turn it around in a season. We didn't expect to get knocked out by San Francisco, but you know, God love them, they did. And I mean, it was great things for the league. So at the same time, I lose a game, and I always say, well, we did it for the ratings and that kind of thing. But that strength and that excitement. It's amazing to be a part of those games from the competitive standpoint, but I truly believe that the backbone of the teams is the revenue sharing, because every owner is incentivized for the other owner to do well. So when we have our teams, we get a visiting team share. So if the other guy isn't selling tickets, I'm upset about it because there aren't fans there. But that share, that 40% share, goes into a pool that we all pull back equally afterwards. So we don't get into each other's business, but we're conscious of one another's business. And so in that sort of, that's the only part that's socialistic that I'll approve of, but it really works for us. And then, you know, we have other mechanisms that help protect teams if they are having troubles. But there's a lot that the league's been doing as far as best practices studies to see what the league can do to help the teams and what we can do to help ourselves. And after they conducted those studies, they realized they thought they would find a lot more commonality. All the teams are very, very different. And that has to do with the ownership and their philosophies, and it also has to do with the personality of the fans in the market. But, you know, you would think that they would be different, but sports franchise, they're all such unique animals. So when you're doing business and if you want to be in sports, it's not about analytics. It's about these personalities and how you marry the two together. And if you can't put them together, then you're going to have difficulty.
We're now approaching the buy or sell portion of this program. We're going to be quick here. You guys are going to have 20 seconds to buy or sell a statement as given to us by you guys. This is from WB Giants. He asks, or she asks, would a relegation system like the Premier League, like the system they have in the Premier League, work in the United States? So let's go around the horn and buy or sell relegation in professional sports in America. Darryl.
Do we get to say why?
Yeah, you've got 20 seconds, so be quick.
Sell.
Okay,
Sell. I think the U.S. model better allows for, you know, stronger ownership, because you know you won't get bounced out.
Sell. I think the way the salary structures are in most of the leagues keep it competitive, unlike the Premier League where there could be such a large disparity in payroll.
George?
Sell. I mean, from the time we spent over there looking at properties, it seems like they've got even more problems than we do. So why import them?
Sell for now. In the MLS, I'd love to see it, but we're not strong enough to do that kind of thing now. Maybe in 50 years we could do it, but it's not possible right now. I love the whole system in the EPL, by the way. Just can't do it yet.
Rita?
Sell. They also have issues in officiating and things because they can't be as responsive to the fans because they have so many different groups. If you're in a closed system where it's your league, you control the rules, and it's just, to me, it's so much more fair and responsive to what's actually happening, whether that's with injuries or sales or, responding to the public. And so we're far more nimble in our structures, the way these
Do you think
leagues are.
it makes for a very interesting last couple of weeks of the season, kind of enthralling?
I love it.
Let's work the room here. Who's going to buy relegation by a show of hands? Let me see if anyone's buying relegation here for any sport in America. Okay, so there are some people, more hands popping up.
Somebody wrote an article about, and Sports Illustrated wrote an article that the NBA should be divided into 2 tiers, because it kind of is now. Half of them are really good and half of them aren't. And why not make it like a Division I and Division II in the NBA, and you get dropped down or promoted up, and that would make it exciting, for the fans.
Franchise values. I'm sure the owners on the bottom wouldn't.
Yeah, the owners.
appreciate it.
It'll never go in the United States.
It would be an even better solution if you could come up with a system where everybody could be competitive. I mean, that's the idea, and that's what the leagues strive for. And sometimes you do better, and sometimes you do worse, and a lot of times the system doesn't play out the way you hope.
We have next question here from GD25. Is winning games enough to drive fan interest, or do you have to do more than just win? Tara, you can address that first. You don't need to buy or sell it because that's a little bit more complex. Woody Page would just steamroll through that and not answer the question, so feel free to do that.
I agree with the panel. You need to interact with your fans, and I think it's the general manager's responsibility to sell a plan to the fans.
Yeah, winning certainly goes a long way. I mean, we discovered it this year that how dormant our fan base was and how they came alive through our season and our playoff run. But you've really got to maximize that by engaging with them as much as you can in as many outlets as you can and channels that you can. Really, fans crave experience. They crave stories. They want to be. They want what you can't buy. Going behind the curtain, learning about being able to meet a player, being able to meet a coach, being able to meet an owner. Those things that you could do for them behind the curtain just enhances their already positive feelings of winning.
We're in the game to win. I think we want to do everything else, but I think at the end of the day, we're in the game to win. If we weren't, I think the owners would be in another business. So that's what we're in the game for.
Yeah, in Seattle, we just want to win. Bottom line, But we want to sleep at night too. So we want to treat our fans well. So we're not. We could sell cocaine to make money. You know what I mean? Just want. That's the thing. We want to win no matter what, but we want to be able to treat our fans well.
It's against the law.
Yeah.
It's against the law.
Your team has, that's awesome. Not awesome, but whatever. Your team has to be poised and ready to capture success in winning as well, because there was at least one example of a team that won the Super Bowl, but they didn't sell out the next year. So did they not send out invoices? Did they not rescale the house? I mean, there's a lot of things that your fans might be willing, but if you're not ready to capture their excitement, or if the way your stadium is situated and it's just difficult to get concessions, there are so many things that are very important that add to all of that success. And so sometimes just being responsive, maybe it is checking to make sure the speakers aren't blown in their section, but you also have to deal with the management of the building and them believing you and the fans. And so we're giving you very top-level philosophical elements, but you have to realize there's so much more down in the details that actually has to be done. And that's likely the job that you'll have if you're trying to go into sports.
Verrill_Boston writes, do you sometimes have to overpay for a player to save the short term because you fear you might not be in there for the long term? This is a great question. This was in the opening synopsis of what this panel would be talking about, short term versus long term. How do you reconcile? How do you work around that? You want to start there?
Yeah, so where I'd agree that you should overpay is a term to talk about, but where you should really go hard to pay a lot for a player, even beyond you're comfortable, is when you're close to a title. It's rational when you're close to trade out the future for the present, because you don't get close very often out of 30. We did that when we traded for Ron Artest a few years ago, giving up 2 draft picks. Where I would disagree is that the GMs sort of own career timing, or might get voted out, should ever come into play. It should always be the organization goals that come first.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about if you're a player or 2 away and you want to make a run, you would overpay. The delicate balance there is that a coach and a GM, it may not be necessarily their tenure or their contract, but they might always feel they're a player or 2 away, and during that free agency period want to go get that player. So it's managing that balance that's key.
Well, this is where analytics helps a lot, because you can't, it makes it harder to argue that, oh, we're close. You can be like, you think we're close, but it's really far. Yeah. I'm looking at George for that,
I know.
not the Rockets.
Exactly. I agree with that. And you need to make it transparent, so that everybody understands, okay, how will we know when we're close or not? Where are we now in the progression? And then you can get a better understanding of it. I can tell you, having been in the business for 15 years, that a lot of people think that they're 1 or 2 players away and behave as if they're 1 or 2 players away when they're nowhere near it. And as a result, it's not really driving profit. It's driving lots of losses. And if you want to be in that category where you're successful on the field and off, or on the court and off, you want to learn how to be realistic about the opportunities that you have competitively, and how those are going to drive revenue.
Commissioner Stern always had the best line: every team in the NBA is 1 player away. Shaquille O'Neal.
In the MLS, the pay us so low, we really don't have that problem.
Hold on. I think we have a special situation with our current head coach, in that he doesn't pick favorites in marquee players. We've had players that we certainly paid more for to acquire in free agency, but because he's in such a cerebral, offensive game with the opponents, you just really never know who he's going to use. And it truly is a meritocracy in terms of it just doesn't have to do with what we paid for that guy. That is clearly very important as far as the cash flow and the management. But in terms of those guys, I guess it keeps them and their agents on their toes, that because of how everyone's being played and they're constantly being used, they know I'm not the only guy on offense except for maybe our quarterback, and so they're working on that right now.
We have 1 minute left, and we're going to, this is addressed directly to Drew. So, Goulet _Packers. Big Goulet fan. Why do fans in Seattle embrace MLS more than other cities?
Well, when we started out, we went directly to the fan. We did most of our marketing through fan groups, message boards, things like that. Instead of advertising to the general public, we went right to them and engaged them immediately. And that was our strategy from the beginning. And we, that plus giving them the vote and letting them vote on the team name and stuff, it just makes them a lot more engaged. Plus our stadium is downtown. We're 4 blocks away from where all the bars are. We have a big march to the mat. We have a lot of nice traditions we set up that are really fan friendly. I don't know. And the guy that owned the basketball team moved to Oklahoma City. That helped us a lot. To be honest, it was like meeting a hot girl that had an abusive boyfriend.
I love that one.
I think that's how you end the panel right there. I think that was the FaceTime to end the show. So we very much thank Rita Benson LeBlanc for joining us today. Good luck to the Saints going forward. Drew Carey from Seattle Sounders. Best of luck this upcoming season, George Postelos, Houston Astros. Year 1 with the Astros. Knock them dead. Parag Marate with the San Francisco 49ers. 1 year as COO. 1 NFC West championship, so you're setting the bar high, which is nice. And the Godfather, Mr. Daryl Morey, who's working, with the trade deadline just days away. So we really appreciate him being here, being so forthright with the Jeremy Lin.
Thanks,
and
Tony.
for the MVP with the mute of the host. So that was very well done. This concludes the entertainment portion of your program, but thank you very much.